CellNet workshops that NSF has organized. This is a new program from the National Science Foundation designed to link networks of networks across disciplines and across national boundaries in order to accelerate science and discovery. So we're one of the first projects, and they're doing a great job supporting us, and we're happy to have TDI helping us today, because this is a big enterprise to pull this all together. So here are our meeting objectives. So we'll have, this is the formal kickoff. This is GLASSNet, it's starting officially. And we'll come out of this with 4 working groups that will have been populated over the course of the week and fleshed out. They encompass both research themes and infrastructure themes. So infrastructure being data, cyber infrastructure, but also human capital infrastructure. So we aim to identify key challenges and community activities to address those challenges, schedule summer workshops. There'll be a workshop each month through June through September, led by one of the working groups, identify relevant short courses and early career exchange opportunities. Before we know it, people will be traveling again. And a key part of this project is to facilitate the movement of early career professionals between these networks and amongst the community. We'll be establishing some shared communication tools. We're already leaning heavily on Slack, but there are others as well, and we'll be introduced to those. And finally, to meet new collaborators and have some fun. This is a group that is obviously committed to these important topics, and it's also a group that likes to have a little bit of fun, and Marissa and her team will facilitate that as well. We're motivated by the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I'm sure all of you are aware of those. We're focused on the half of those SDGs that pertain to the world's land and water resources and the increasing pressure that they're under, particularly pressure from the global food system that we'll spend devote particular attention to. Our goals are to enable transformative analysis in support of decision-making around the SDGs, to develop diverse human capital with a strong emphasis on developing the next generation of leaders after those of us in my generation retire, who's going to be leading this, and there are fantastic people coming along and we want to support them. We want to form a network of networks that will allow for ongoing integration across these disciplines and geographies. So a key theme of this, in case you haven't picked up on it already, from say the background document that was circulated, we're going to be all about global to local to global analysis. So there are a lot of people working on the SDGs, a lot of people working on land and water, but we think GLASSNet is somewhat uniquely positioned to focus in on what we would call the GLG, global, local, global linkages. So what is this? I think we're all aware of the global forces driving sustainability stresses, climate change, growing population, income growth, and other factors as well. And the way these stresses are felt vary from locality to locality. So sustainability is fundamentally a local kind of analysis. You can't talk about sustainability in general. It's sustainability in a particular location, and that depends on the local governance, whether it's water rights or other types of economic arrangements, sociological arrangements, but also things like soils and climate, which vary by locality and will affect the way localities respond to these global stresses. So the way they respond, of course, varies, but also as that accumulates, those responses accumulate, whether it's setting aside land or preserving water or whatnot, that can filter back and have global impacts through the economy, but also through climate. And to understand the global to local feedbacks, that's a key challenge that we want to address here in a transdisciplinary context. just an example that Justin Johnson developed for our proposal that's in the background document. If you were interested in, for example, something that Justin and Joris Baldos have been studying, the interplay between preserving pollinator habitat and the global economy, in particular food security. Well, food security is typically analyzed at, say, a national or a regional level, even an international level. Here they've pulled out Ghana as an example. That's a country where food security is an important issue. That's typically studied at the national level. We're thinking about markets and regional markets. But to understand the pollinators, you need a fine scale approach. So that's not at all at the national level. That's at a very fine scale, 10 to 300 meters. Is this natural habitat proximate to important crops or not? That preservation, the value of that preservation will depend on that proximity. So you need the fine scale approach. Well, in order to go from coarse scale to, say, a medium scale in between, which maybe there might be crop competition going on, land and water resource competition, to the fine scale, you need land, you need the data to be harmonized, you need the models to be harmonized so you can pass results back and forth from the global to the regional to the local level, and then back as you ascertain the impacts of preserving the pollinator habitat, the impacts on yields, that filters back up. So this is the kind of thing we want to tackle here. How do we do it? Well, our proposal is very much written around the GeoHub, and you'll hear later this morning from Carol Song, who leads the development of the GeoHub. It's been funded by NSF over many years. It's now stretching out to a 10-year program, a place for interdisciplinary collaboration, for shared tools, for shared data, and for us to share information about ourselves. So the project as written and as currently stands has a set of US-based networks. NSF is, after all, a US focused entity to some degree. So these are US based, even though they're international networks. There's the GTAP project that is primarily economists looking at things typically at the national and international level. The Natural Capital Project, dominated by ecology, thinking about things at a very fine scale. KUASI, a consortium of hydrologists, NSF supported, focusing on water. And so the quote foreign-based networks, these are NSF terminology, even though they're also global networks, the Global Gridded Crop Model Intercomparison, GlobeEcon, part of AgMIP, EasyMIP, the Global Land Program, and looking at a new network based in Germany of a group focused on global land use change, ecology, and data synthesis. So that's the starting point, but we know many of you already from our surveys, many of you are coming from other networks that will plug in nicely here. We want to get you involved. We want you to be part of the schematic, part of GLASSNet. And so the first step in doing that is just to look at your goals. Do they align with the GLASSNet goals? That's the key here. And so this is out of the proposal, out of the background document, but the three major goals and how we've identified alignment of these networks that are currently involved. So after this week, you can, if you're interested in pursuing this, first develop your network alignment and start communicating with us. And we look forward to expanding the network greatly, not just in terms of individuals, but also in terms of other networks. This is a schematic that Steve Pulaski developed when we were on the whiteboard when we were first talking about this proposal, and I think it nicely illustrates how there's this global to local to global set of interactions going on here, and there are many disciplines involved here. We've outlined those that were featured in the proposal. They're color coded. So crop science, for example, green, ecology, yellow, and they're highlighted in various places in the text by color. There are also networks involved. This is kind of how we see this broadly, this interaction evolving, that there are the global drivers, there are those who worry about that, the climate scientists, the folks in the GTAP network, and geographers and others thinking about these global drivers, and those feeding all of the networks are interested in how these global drivers affect outcomes at the local level and decisions, but they're the interplay at the macroeconomic and microeconomic level, and also and feeding down to the outcomes, which in many cases are local, but others, food security is often measured, say, at a national or even an international level. So we're interested in getting to these outcomes and seeing that how those outcomes, for example, the pollinator, natural pollinator one might feed back in turn to the regional and global level. So that's the broad theme. You'll see there's a regional deployment concept here. So there are 3 institutions very much engaged in these sustainability issues that were very interested in being involved in the proposal. And they're highlighted as we call test beds or regional deployment. So these are not networks, they're institutes, but they play an important role in their regions. CMCC, climate change in the Mediterranean region, and BRAPA, having to do with agriculture, land use, biodiversity in Brazil, and the Chinese Academy of Sciences contributing in many areas, but this group particularly interested in ecosystem services. So we anticipate those getting involved in regional deployment, being very much involved from the beginning, not as networks, but as potential test beds. So this is the organizational chart as it currently stands. It's continuing to evolve, but this gives you an idea of how we see GLASSNET structured in order to get maximum interaction, maximum input from all of you. The Stakeholder Advisory Board is key in our view. These are people involved on a day-to-day basis with these various sustainability issues. So they have their pulse on what's going on out there in the world and the decision-making, the policy level, the national, international level. And we want them to be providing, as they have done already, continuous input into the project to make sure that we're headed in a direction that will be beneficial in the large. The project leadership, playing that role of leadership. Someone has to try to guide the ship, and we've been meeting on a bi-monthly basis, and this GLASSNET week is one outcome of those meetings. We've got a network council, and those are high-level people representing the various networks involved. The green is where the work gets done. Science Committee, you're going to hear more about that from Steve Pulaski, who chairs that. The Science Committee was key in shaping GLASSNET Week and what you're going to be talking about. So that's really at the heart of the project. We're also very committed to human capital development, international engagement, and of course, the GeoHub facilitating data standardization, integration, and whatnot. What do we look like presently? Well, not all of you are orange dots here because not all of you responded in a timely way, perhaps, but we've got many of you up here already, thanks to Raquel Asensio, who you'll be hearing from later this morning, and is part of this whole project is studying how do you build a network of network, what works, what doesn't work. This is very important to NSF, and it's very important to us. An outcome of this, important outcome of this effort, GLASSNET effort, is not just a successful GLASSNET, but understanding what it takes to build a network of networks. I'm sure many of you are doing this, undertaking this kind of an effort as well. I know the European Union is funding some similar efforts. What can we learn from GLASSNET to make those efforts more successful? And so Raquel will be highlighting, you will become a study group. So bear with us on that, but that's important. Of course, the orange dots are people here. The blue dots are the original GLASSNET networks, and the green dots are all the things that you identified as possible networks, groups that also need to be involved to tie us together. Project roadmap, just briefly, that we have, it's a 5-year project, and there are these major phases that we'll move through. We do have 3 biannual meetings. The first one will be at Purdue in October. That will follow up in year 3 in Minnesota and year 5 at Stanford. So we want this not to end at 5 years, but rather to be sustained. And there, the key involvement of stakeholders will be key. So just an overview of the week. We're in plenary now, obviously. When we're not in plenary, we're going to be in breakout groups, and there'll be 7 or 8 of those because we got a lot of people here, and we want to give you just one screen worth of people that you can talk to and get to know and interact with. And those will be organized along these working group idea lines. We'll start with the research themes. Steve will talk about that momentarily. And there'll be a breakout today, and then Wednesday morning again, a recap of that, and then we'll move into the infrastructure themes Wednesday and Friday. So there's even a social activity envisioned for Friday, thanks to Marissa and her team, and a closing plenary. Where do we go from here?